I'd like to add a second reading. This is from the Gospel of Thomas. So the Gospel of Thomas is not an official part of the Bible. It's a very old sacred text that is a collection of sayings of Jesus. So it's not a narrative. And they discovered it in the Nag Hammadi find in 1945. But there's some words that are very similar to what we just heard. This is saying 22. Jesus saw some babies nursing, and he said to his disciples, "These nursing babies are like those who enter the kingdom of heaven." These nursing babies are like those who enter the kingdom of heaven. Then they said to him, "Then shall we enter the kingdom as babies?" Jesus said to them, very confusingly, Jesus said to them, "When you make the two into one, when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male nor the female female. When you make an eye in place of an eye, and a hand in place of a hand, foot in place of a foot, and an image in place of an image, then you will enter the kingdom." Anybody else's head getting very confused by this incredible paradox here? And in today's gospel that we just heard, Jesus is teaching us in paradox again. Whoever welcomes one such as a child in my name welcomes me, and the first will be last. Now, just before this, he's been trying to explain to the disciples that his death is coming. He's trying to help them connect with him through the timeless wisdom and unitive way that they will need to continue to be in connection with him. I think he's trying to get them to see, and trying to get us to see, 2,000 years later, deeper than just our eyes. And I have a song that takes this difficult, how can things be male and not male, and female and not female, and up and down? How can it be all happening at the same time? Well, that's where music is a great medicine. This is a song by a friend of mine called Samara Jade. It's called The Unseen Song. She got very excited when she realized that around the world, somewhere, it's sunset and birds are singing everywhere. That there is time within time. The gift of paradox. I listened to the silence till it was no longer silence, till it was filled up with bird song that had been there all along, till it was filled up with bird song that had been there all along. And I looked into the sunset till it was no longer sunset, till the sky grew darker and filled on up with stars, till the sky grew darker and filled on up with stars that were there all along. This is your bit. That were there all along. One more time. Yeah, they were there all along. The underlying unseen song. And I stopped to smell the flowers till they were no longer flowers. They began to wilt and droop and develop into fruit that turned to seeds and back to flowers that had been there all along. And I searched the world for answers till they turned into questions that shone light upon the answers that had been there all along, that shone light upon the answers that had been there all along. Yeah, they were there all along. Yeah, it was there all along. Yeah, it was there all along. The underlying unseen song. And the light obscures the darkness hides the light, and the stars are still shining when the sun is shining bright. Oh, how unimaginable, how many layers go unseen in this dream, in this dream. So much more than it seems. And I felt into my sadness till it was no longer sadness, till it was filled up with fullness that had been there all along, till it was filled up with fullness that had been there all along. And I cut through my aloneness until it melted into oneness of that web of shining dewdrops that connects us all as one. Yes, that web of shining dewdrops that connects us all as one. Yeah, it was there all along. Yeah, it was there all along. Yeah, it was there all along. The underlying unseen song. And I spoke my words till they were no longer words, till they sounded no different than the songs sung by the birds still sing even when they can't be heard. All of the symphonies get blurred into the colors of the world as turning powered by the bird song that's been there all along. Yes, that great wave of bird song that has been here all along. The Unseen Song by Samara Jade. Paradox, beautifully explained. Yeah, the mind boggles when we think how to make the two into one, how to make an eye in place of an eye, a hand in place of a hand, an image in place of an image. And what's being asked of us is actually very uncomfortable. But actually, sometimes it's not that uncomfortable at all to hold paradox and drop beneath the binary into a third or more expanded way of seeing. Nature has moments of yes and all the time. Marshes, which are neither land nor water. Sunset, which is neither day nor night. Or adolescence, where my niece is both a child and a woman right at the same time, split seconds right next to each other. Is beautiful to behold, and it won't last for very long. And today is one of those glorious fleeting days because it is the autumn equinox. It happened at like 8:50 or something. As I was driving here, I was like, oh, we're driving through that threshold. It's going to be dark soon and winter's coming. But right now we are halfway between summer and winter. And when I look out from my house, I see flowering New England asters and trees dropping their leaves. Yes, and in the seasons. If it exists in nature, it exists in us. And I believe that anything that exists in nature spiritually is true also. My hero, St. Francis, said that Mother Earth is the mirror of God. Mother Earth is the mirror of God. And it's very wise to spend a lot of time observing the laws and patterns of this living earth. Our bodies are made up of this stuff, and our religion tells us that we are Adam and Eve. Adam meaning soil or earth, and Eve meaning breathing or living clay. Now, some teachers have suggested that the Eden myth is actually about what happened to us when our consciousness discovered language. That the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was language. That when we started naming things, our world became very different. And this is such an interesting idea. I've been thinking about it for years. Now, I have a hunch that the fall from Eden is actually just what happens to our soul when we end up in a little child's body. That we end up on this world where painful and terrible things can happen. But I'm digressing. My point about my teachers who said that language separates us, separates things. Today from tomorrow, you are not me. This word describes this thing that is not that thing. And I've had the joy of spending time with babies that can communicate but are not verbal, not with me, I'm not their parent. I also went to Japan, and traveled around a lot of places where I had no language and they had no English. And there was a real depth of being where I could communicate much easier than if they had a few words of French and I had a few words of French. Words introduce binaries. And yes, this natural world is full of polarities, but not binaries. Binaries are the way that we separate things out so that we can make sense of it. Binaries do not exist as absolutes in the way that we people pigeonhole them to be. And comparison of binaries is one of the worst human traits, especially when it is combined with an insecure ego, like what we heard in the Bible passage. The disciples were arguing among them, who's the greatest? I'm the greatest. What a waste of a life. Rumi says that beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. Similarly, a mystic I've been steeped in recently is Julian of Norwich. She had a near-death experience during the bubonic plague and almost died. And in that, she met God. She met Christ. The crucifix came alive. And she asked God all sorts of questions. And she invented the term one-ing, to describe the unitive consciousness and feeling that she experienced during her near-death experience. One-ing. And I think Jesus over and over again uses paradox to prod us to stop battling over the binaries and to drop deeper into a more expanded heart, to think bigger, to experience time bigger, and to see beyond our judgments. And I think this is genius because it trips up that religious trap that almost everybody falls into. We're given the truth, the right way, and people become righteous. They use their Bible to hit other people rather than to drop into the consciousness of the universe. And we all do it, even if we're only doing it to ourselves. A teacher I love is James Finley. These are his words. There are those who hold that one religion is the true religion. And almost always, when this occurs, the religion just happens to be their own. There is, in the absoluteness of view, a lack of humility, which closes us off to the way God works in the hearts and lives of other people, in ways that are different than we are accustomed to. Let me read that last part again. There is, in the absoluteness of view, a lack of humility which closes us off to the way God works in the hearts and lives of other people in ways that are different than we are accustomed to. And humility liberates us from such notions. That is why humility is so paired up with wisdom. The wise person is the humble person. They know so deeply because they know the limits of their knowledge. I love this when we think about why babies go into heaven. Holding paradox and embodying the both and quality of the autumn equinox is helpful. It's a helpful spiritual practice because it can help us transcend duality and the limited way that we tend to see the world. Just as a small child needs to learn that when they say, I can't see you, so you can't see me. That's not true. But it's very true to that child in the moment. Now, we adults need to learn to bring a depth of wisdom and compassion to what we witness and understand. Because humans are convinced that the truth, the way that we see it, is the truth, the only truth. Like how long ago people were so convinced that the world was flat and that the boats would fall off the edge of the world. We're so convinced about the things that we know. Now, when I went to seminary, they talked about adopting a yes and approach to life. They urged us to soften our rigidity and to embrace other paths. They asked us to humble up and honor the sacred mystery which holds wisdom and a larger mind. A larger mind, but we get so fixated. Rainer Maria Rilke, have you come across him before? German mystic, wonderful poet. He says this: be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart, and try and love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything, to live the questions now. And perhaps then you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. And what Rilke is describing here is a deeply uncomfortable path. We have times of ego distress when our world is shattered and we just want to know why. God, why did this happen? Why did this happen? But here we're arguing with reality. We're arguing with the past and wanting it to be different. David Foster Wallace says, everything I have let go of has claw marks on it. We're desperately trying and hold on. I do that. Choosing to bear the unknown and letting go of the need to find answers is a very brave and difficult move. Like choosing to forgive something that's really unforgivable. It requires a reorientation towards love, placing love above personal injury and ego distress. I actually think it's God that brings that healing to us. I don't think we're capable of forgiveness. I think it's a grace. Places God in us. But we can open to it or refuse. No, the world is flat. Don't be stupid. You don't exist. And the heart is our ally here because it doesn't make division in the same way that our senses do and our thinking minds. We don't stop loving our first child just because there's a second baby born. That would be ridiculous. And we don't stop loving people just because they die. A frightened heart might close off, but the heart just grows and grows. Joanna Macy says, when we open our eyes to what is happening, even if it breaks our hearts, we discover our true size. For our heart, when it breaks open, can hold the whole universe. Holding paradox and opposing truths is needed to do this. Now, Joanna Macy is talking about environmental work and our hearts breaking around the creatures that are suffering and our descendants that will suffer. But it's also in our inner work. Francis Weller, the wonderful teacher on grief, says, the work of the mature person is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and to be stretched large by them. How much sorrow can I hold? That's how much gratitude I can give. If I only carry grief, I bend towards cynicism and despair. If I have only gratitude, I become saccharine and won't develop much compassion for other people's suffering. Grief keeps the heart fluid and soft, which helps make compassion possible. Beyond ideas of right and wrong doing, There is a field, a singing field. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. Rumi, the Sufi poet that I'm singing here, is pointing towards an expansive place where greater healing happens, where a bigger life greets us laughing, like the father welcoming home the prodigal son. The mind cannot do that because the ego has been injured, but the heart can, very naturally. Years ago, somebody told me that Maya Angelou said, hope and fear cannot occupy the same place at the same time. So invite one to stay. Let me read that quote again. Hope and fear cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Invite one to stay. Now, I've been thinking about this. I'm wondering if this is perhaps why Jesus asks us to be servants. Maybe Jesus tells us that the last will be first, that the humble will be the most spiritually powerful. Because when you take the focus off your own needs and redirect your purpose to offset the need, then you accidentally stumble into the answer, into the healing. Or in other words, when you find a way to pardon rather than blame, or to focus on what you believe in rather than what you doubt, if you find a way to console others in need rather than tend your own sad story. Anybody in the choir realizing that you're about to sing these words? They're in our hymn coming up. Prayer of St. Francis. Sometimes things happen to us that we cannot integrate or accept. And in our mind we go searching for answers that cannot be given to us. Betrayal, grief, disappointment. In these situations, it's important that we tell our story. It's very important. But after we have done that, we must create more spaciousness and allow paradox to come in. Yes, that happened. It was terrible. It's not the only thing that happened to me in my life. Holding paradox, good and bad, in the same situation, dropping into the heart, can short circuit that thinking mind that goes over and over and over, telling the same story, wishing it was a different outcome. And it never is. It's always the same past. Always happened. Yep, today it happened again. 10 years ago, same thing. Just like the equinox can be the midpoint between summer and winter, with autumn colors and flowers, we can hold more than one story of what is true. Yes, I can't make things better sometimes. There's so much that is painful and difficult in this world. But I can sure do something to alleviate the suffering and shift the focus away from me and my painful truth to include a new purpose, a healing, and service to others. I've chosen the hymn for us, and I'm going to sing my setting of it first, of the prayer of St. Francis, because Francis held paradox beautifully. We're going to sing about that. I'm going to sing about it. His sacred transformation happened when he took a situation in his life that was very, very wrong. He had a violent, rich, greedy, merchant, controlling father. And he had PTSD from being in a war and being shoved in a dungeon for a year, a medieval dungeon. But he created within himself a peace that passed all understanding. And in the eyes of the people of Assisi looking on, he went from being a crazy madman who lost everything to a saint, closer than anybody else has ever got to Jesus. If he could do that transformation of lead into spiritual growth and healing, then we can too. Jesus tells us that what he did, we can do. We can all access a depth of understanding and compassion larger than our circumstance. And when we do that, we drop into our soul, which is part of God. Yeah, we keep our ego, but we drop into a much deeper wisdom. So I'm going to sing about that, and then you can sing back, if you agree. I mean, songs are a way that the congregation gets to affirm or not. So here's my setting of the prayer of St. Francis, and then we'll hear from you guys. Lord, make me a channel of your peace. Grant that I can see through my human pain and still feel loved. Paradox. And in the darkness, let light be found. I need light to find me here. Lord, make me a channel of your peace. We all need to learn to forgive a few more 100 times. Melt our hatred and let love take root in our hearts. Lord, make me a channel of your peace. And through my own pain and need, I will learn to understand. Reach through our sorrow, let it be joy. Oh, let it be joy.